than 3% of trade, which is much less than 3% of GDP.
And I was going to say, yeah, from seeing these scored in Congress, usually they're marginally negative. They look at, as Ed mentioned, lost tariff rates. They usually also anticipate a couple of jobs being added at Commerce or USTR. So, but usually it's a marginal number. It's not a massive number. It may be slightly larger in the case of Korea, but usually not enough to cause a major issue in terms of implementation.
Thanks, Chris Nelson, Washington. Steve, I congratulate you on your graphics. I guess somebody just gets those great pictures and
I'm certain of that.
yeah, that's fabulous. I think Joe's question kind of summed it all up. But I think one of the questions that is derived from that we've been hearing for the last year and a half, but all the while, we're talking to our green counterparts about how to deal with what Sandy Leather wants on autos and what Congress wants on counts. And my question is, my God, how much more talk do you have to have before you get some things that you can present? And every time, any of us asks about what's being presented here, damn thing. So, are we watching the U.S. Korean equivalent of kabuki here? Are they waiting for, this divine intervention from the White House to present the strategic picture? Or are they actually having these conversations? It's a big chicken and egg problem. And certainly from our standpoint, if you're not really working on the things to present to Sandy Levitt and Nancy Pelosi, what the hell are you doing? Because Obama's never going to present a strategic picture if he can't say, okay, I've taken care of it.
And I have a corollary there too, real quick. Is there also in the chicken and egg metaphor sense that if the administration can't go to the Korean government and say, if we can get this resolved, you can send this up next week, or give it a specific time frame, can they ever actually that conversation go anywhere?
This is the thing, and I think Chris, you get onto incredibly deep ones and on Troy's too. It's like, as anyone who's ever been involved in negotiations knows, there's a deadline. That's when things will you'll map out the time you need back from the deadline. And that's why some of the things we've thought about strategically is using the G20 or APEC or others to create that kind of hard or tangible deadline for moving it forward. But your other point is very key. And the sense that I get from, talking to my old colleagues that, sat across the negotiating table for a long time, in Ways and Means and other roles, is that there's not really that kind of creative, and actually on both sides of the aisle, there's a desire to engage in that. And we and others I know have tried to help them through that process, because they have made some of these public statements that you have to find face-saving ways or ways to address it. And the issues, at the end of the day, are, if you take both parties at face value, there should be creative ways that you can find to get around the NTB issues, whether it's, more transparency or, ratcheting up review process. I think we're going to have to think creatively and maybe outside of the dispute method settlement, lawyerly, litigation model that we've done before. But, we do this in regulatory federalism systems all the time. He may be a little bit tougher politically, but at the end of the day, people think that may be easier. But I think it's got to be engaging, the Fords, the people on both sides of the aisle, and the Congress. One of the problems with the Congress is when you try, and you can, having been, USTR in there, is this not invented here. If they're not consulted and they're delivered something on the silver platter, said, see, we solved your problem with this, this magic fix that you weren't involved in. A lot of times it can cause a lot of concern. And my biggest concern about the runway is that there's not those discussions going on with the Congress in a bipartisan way. And I think there's a lot of well-meaning people that could find some solutions.
How many times do you tell privately, I can't get the golf course back for a year and a half, they can't figure this one out.
Quick addition to that, I agree with Steve's comments. The question I've had is this kabuki? Kabuki is like a very flashy and colorful thing. The other form of Japanese drama is there's kind of long, they're really, really slow, basically nothing ever happens. The question is it kabuki?
There's also the old song, usually is
Tammy.
Tammy Overby with U.S. Chamber. I just have two questions I'd like y'all to quickly consider. What happens if Korea, Japan, and China announce that they're launching their own FTA negotiation? Will this change the dynamic here? And secondly, are we seeing a paradigm shift for the U.S. auto industry? It's my understanding that historically they supported FTAs. Are they moving to a position now where they are no longer going to be in support of free trade?
To the second question, the U.S. auto industry, I think this is it's not a unique case, but it is one that would apply probably in Korea and Japan. There's long-term stressed relationships and frustrations that are exacerbated by the crisis of the big three auto companies this year. So I don't think there's a paradigm change, really. I think this is an unusually difficult time for them and builds on top of long-term problems that have existed for several decades. What was the first question?
Korea, Japan, and China,
Oh.
what if they want?
I don't think people in the political system will care very much. What is important, and goes back to your question about Speaker in the House of Representatives, if this agreement or trade policy in general are defined as ways for the U.S. to break out of our slump and respond to growth, then that will set a framework that makes it positive. If not, then it will be more difficult. But I don't think the political system reacted very much to the EU-Korea negotiations, and I'm not convinced that Japan, Korea, China reaction would be much different.
I'd say on the auto issues, I agree this may be particularly Japan and Korea, in terms of the U.S. auto industry. And I think, again, it goes on to some of their concerns about NTVs, but I think also if you talk to the auto guys, they may deny this. But if you look at their profit margins, and being a business guy, a lot of that comes from light trucks. So how much is that dynamic going to impact the overall domestic sales too? Is something I think that has to be factored into this specific agreement. I disagree a little bit with that on the Korea, Japan, China piece, because I do think the ultimate way that this is going to move forward, part of it is selling it on the jobs issue and relating to that. But I heard Fred Gerson talk the other day about even on NAFTA, that it was the strategic issues and the importance that ultimately sold it to the American people. And I think seeing that we've got to compete with Asia, which I think is something that they really understand, and how far behind we're falling in terms of all of those FTAs I showed on that chart are pretty watered down, in terms of U.S. standards. But seeing how that explosion of them looking away from the United States and that strategic interest, I think, is very important. I think the more things kind of wake them up. Some ways the EU doesn't evoke that kind of, I think, same fear from the loss of U.S. jobs that some of the Asian economies do. But I think they do understand that we've got to compete and win and build alliances there. And I think that's something that's resonating with the American people, sometimes more than all the great econometric statistics you can provide them about different things.
The only thing I would just add real quick is I do think over time there's sort of a cumulative effect. If you look at what Korea is doing on FTAs, they probably have the most robust FTA program in the world. Australia, New Zealand, the GCC, they're looking at Mercosur, they're doing Peru, they want to restart with Japan bilaterally. So if a lot of this stuff shapes out the way they're planning, over time there is a cumulative effect as well. Yeah.
Dick Cunningham, Stepstone Johnson. Full disclosure, I advised Korea in the KORUS negotiations and specifically on the auto front. Both of you were worked with the Congress and in USTR. I want you to focus on autos and think about this as a problem, and I'd like to ask you how to solve it. In the KORUS FTA, the Korean position was on autos, tell us what NTBs you want to address, and we'll work out the deal we need to have worked out. I understand that's Korea's position today. For the UAW and their supporters of Congress, including one person inside USTR, took the view that we're not going to play that game. We want a quantification solution to get your duties reduced in the U.S. in proportion to how many more cars you let into Korea. That is a type of trade negotiation that has been rejected, to my knowledge, by 4 consecutive administrations, including by your old boss and my great friend Charlene. And that's where I understand the Ford new UAW are now. How do you resolve that as a substantive issue? Or do you just say to